Pleasure to introduce Naftali Hirsch, who has joined us for this wonderful Shabbat. It's been a pleasure having him daven and lead us in all kinds of aspects and just simply being here this Shabbat. He's a fifth-year student at Hebrew College and serves Congregation Shari Tefillah in upstate New York as their intern. Baruch haba.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. I want to start before I begin this drasha just by saying thank you to everyone in this room, for this community, for the warm welcome that I've been offered. I feel the warmth and the hamishness of this community already, and it means the world. I also want to thank Sylvia and Barbara and the rest of the committee and Susan for the work that they're doing for refugees in this community. It's not what I'm going to speak about today, but I didn't want to step on my toes, and I really appreciate that work. It's so important. When the people are standing at the edge of Eretz Yisrael, 40 years from today's Parashah in Shovavim, Moshe tells them that the brit, the covenant that they are entering into, is being made not just with those who are standing with him before God, but also with those who aren't there. Who are these absentee members of the tribe? Playing on the word for stand, amad, as a stand-in for those with bodies, Midrash Tanchuma tells us that it is each and every one of us. All the souls of the future Jews, whether by birth or by choice, each one of them is there in some form. We encounter this kind of past projection in the Passover Haggadah as well. Bechol dor vador chayav adam lirot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. In each and every generation, a person must view themselves as though they personally left Egypt. We're meant to say, I was there, I suffered, I was redeemed. Ultimately, the Haggadah and the Midrash are both saying that we need to be able to conceive of ourselves within the narrative of these stories, from Egypt to Sinai, even more than in other places in the Torah. This is even the language of the Haggadah. Lir'ot et atzmo ke'ilu hu yatsa mimitzrayim. That a person should see themselves as if they left. And while lirot does mean to see, certainly in Rabbinic Hebrew, it also means to reflect, reason, or consider, to understand ourselves as if we left Egypt and heard revelation alongside our physical or spiritual ancestors. One perspective for how to inhabit this inheritance of living through Exodus, redemption, and revelation is a 500-year-old custom from the Kabbalistic tradition, a notion and associated set of practices called Shovavim. Still very much alive today in Mizrahi, Sephardi, and Hasidic communities. The name is an acronym built from the first letter of each Parashah through the past 6 weeks, including next week's Parashah of Mishpatim. For one, during this time in the heart of winter, Jews fast through most Mondays and Thursdays who take on this practice, and while you may not be looking to bring more fast days into your Jewish life, their intention was to bring a bit more focused attention to their own actions and missteps, or mischief. Mischief makers being the literal translation of that word Shovavim, that acronym. Other practices included keeping silence through these Shabbatot, save for words of Torah and prayer, and day-long chanting rituals. For anyone who isn't cringing at the thought of such a Shabbos, I'm happy to share more at Kiddush. Beyond the anthropological reasons that we could imagine and that I would love to talk through as well, these particular weeks were seen as rife with possibility for projecting ourselves and our own experiences of difficulty into the reading of the Torah. The Jewish people's descent into Egypt, also called Galut Mitzrayim, the exile to Egypt, which is understood by the sages to be a descent into worst version of ourselves as a people, a sort of downward spiral from Abraham. And as you may well know, Egypt, Mitzrayim, comes from this word meitzer, a narrow place. And in Rabbinic Hebrew, it comes to mean distress as well. The Nitivot Shalom, the latest Rebbe of the Hasidic dynasty of Slonim, also simply known as the Slonimer, has a whole series of teachings about these weeks, about this descent into Egypt and up through redemption into Revelation. He's one of many who read this Egyptian exile onto the individual, onto our own descent into distress and constraint within our own lives, onto our own personal stories of feeling causing distance, hurt, brokenness, or of listening to and acting on some internal voice that isn't ultimately serving us. I imagine that for each of us, especially these past 4 months, that what it looks like to sink into our own place of Mitzrayim looks a little different. And that each one of us has a sense of what this is like, what it has been like, a memory of when it's been through, whether that's for you been years or simply a couple of minutes since you last felt this way. The invitation from within Hasidic thought as we read through these Parashot is to see how we can read ourselves into the whole arc of these stories, not only of descending into a narrow place, the stresses and anxieties that each of us already knows, that this view calls galut, but also into finding our way out, into redemption. I can say, I'm not going to suggest that it is easy to take ourselves out of those moments of constraint, or that there's any one way for us to do so, to move forward through distress. You know yourselves better than I do, certainly, and better than any sage who I could quote from our tradition, whose words can only gesture at a possible path. The Slonimer, for one, points to a potential way for rising out of these narrow places. For him, the pathway out of our missteps goes through yirah, through awe. I can say that for myself, developing a relationship with awe, with yirah, and watching it change me has shifted the constraint with which I walk through the world. It has honestly been one of the most beautiful parts of my relationship to Jewish ritual and spiritual life. Through years of practice, I found myself more able to access awe, and for it, simply more grateful. It's not that I don't get all kinds of caught up in thoughts that will wind me right up, and it's that I'm way more able to actually stop and smell a rose when I see it, despite those thoughts. For me, the act of having a blessing to say when I do brings me more in touch with that expansive part of myself and makes me more likely to do it in the first place and to do it again and to be pulled out of the mire, to be pulled out of those thoughts. And into gratitude for this incredible world full of incredible and, let's be honest, sometimes mediocre smelling roses. Thank God for years I've walked through the streets of Jerusalem where the number of tropically fragrant roses is especially high. And it's not that I don't listen to attentively at times to my own self-critical voice. It's that when there is a thunder during a big storm, I will literally cry out, involuntarily with amazement. And it's in great part because I've been cultivating a sense of childlike wonder through yirah and having a relationship with that thunder that comes with this bracha. This is a practice of uplifting my own sensibilities out of exile, of redeeming a more indifferent part of myself. When I stop myself every time I hear thunder crack, and do so through every storm, year after year, every time I'm becoming a little more attuned, a little more sensitive to the particular elements of my own experience. And through that, I can appreciate increasingly more about it, about the world I'm walking through, and I can let it shake me out of whatever else I might be stuck in, might be feeling, to feel awe instead. Heschel says that awe is a sense for transcendence, for the reference everywhere to mystery anywhere, beyond all things. It enables us to perceive in the world intimations of the divine, to sense in small things the beginnings of infinite significance, to sense the ultimate in the common and the simple, to feel in the rush of the passing the stillness of the eternal. What we cannot comprehend by analysis, we become aware of in awe. And so if these examples seem small, that's because they are. And this repetitive way of encountering the smallest things with a little more intention also weaves each of these experiences together, strengthening the fabric of my connection to each moment and to the next. And so when thunder booms when I'm in upstate New York, this past November, there's an echo of last year's rains in Jerusalem, Boston's summer thunderstorms through the last half dozen years, and those earth-splitting shocks from times in the Laurentians or the White Mountains. And just like every grief recalls every other grief, we know this, and also that our joyous experiences can recall one another as well, or any particular feeling or experience. This can happen through any ritual and a little well-practiced nudging. Each one singularly doesn't have to be so magical, Rather, that they all build. That's the magic. It can be just as true when praying shacharit, lighting candles, reciting kiddush, or any ritual that might be more meaningful for you. Some might take a little more intention than others, especially without the help of embodied experience. But there are also so many different kinds of moments in which our tradition offers tools for building in a little more awe, a little more gratitude, and letting it build and grow and letting it nourish us in these moments so that they can feed us when we need it, that they can be a little something of the miraculous, when we need a little redeeming from that narrow place. It's not foolproof. Don't worry, I still find myself being short-sighted and narrow-minded between the moments of thunder, kiddush, and roses. In this paradigm, though, that too is a part of the process. For another Hasidic thinker, 18th century, Rav Menachem Chernobyl, the Chernobyler Rebbe, try saying that 10 times fast, who's also called the light of our eyes, the Ma'or Einayim, by his students. This is part of the redemptive process. The movement from our constrained view, from that narrow-mindedness, to sensing the infinite is actually one which enables accessing revelation. The Hasidim refer to these different modes of moving through the world as small-mindedness and expansive consciousness. It's not a question of which one you act like and which one that other person acts like. Like any binary, that wouldn't be giving the fuller picture. I imagine that most of us instead spend our days moving between these poles and hoping that when we're in that narrow-minded place, to be able to find some ease, something that's opening for us, that enables seeing a wider vantage point a little more often. And for the Ma'or Einayim, any spiritually motivated act that stirs a desire within us and is performed not just in awe, yira, but with love or joy works just as well as the Slonimer's yira. To bring about these more redemptive moments, and for the Chernobyler within this process of winding one's movements, one step farther into this expansive worldview. Some level of insight or understanding will come to arrive, however small or subtle, alongside an opportunity to take delight and pleasure in that new understanding. For the Ma'or Einayim, this is the real meaning of Kabbalat Torah. Kabbalat HaTorah, receiving the Torah of revelation. This process of holding on to the knowledge that one learns in moving out of our own narrowed view. That is one of hearing the divine voice. As my teacher, Aviva Zornberg, puts it, 600,000 qualities of voice attuned to the consciousness of each individual. Torah generates keener knowledge of the capacity of the individual to resound the voice of God. So the next time you find yourself a little stuck, strained, or harried, I want to offer you a reminder, a question, and a hope. Remember, you've been here before, in Mitzrayim. Is there a little bit of awe, of joy, or of love that you have access to even in this narrow place? Or some other redemptive pattern that you can ride out on? The next time you cross that little opening, cold water on either side, I hope you'll listen for a voice that isn't yours. It might just have something to teach you about yourself. I hope it brings even a little delight. Shabbat Shalom.